My name is Svend-Erik Engh and I'm a Danish storyteller.
My name is Anna Lundquist and I'm a Swedish storyteller.
And we are going to tell you a story that's called King Lindorm.
A lindorm is a very large snake. It's larger than a man and it can be really dangerous.
And here we go. Once upon a time there was a queen. She was out in the forest walking. She was very sad. She was crying, her tears rolling down her cheek, and she was looking. Out there, just in front of her, came an old woman. So she dried her tears and she nodded to the old woman.
And the old woman greeted her and she said, "I know what troubles you and I can help you."
You can't help me. Nobody can help me. I tried everything.
Listen to me well, because I am certain that you did not try this. I know that you desperately want and need to have a child, and this is how you are going to get one. Take your mug, the big one with 2 ears. Bring it out into the garden in the northwest corner. There, in the evening at sunset, turn it upside down and leave it there overnight. And in the morning at sunrise, you shall see that there will be 2 roses underneath, a white rose and a red rose. If you eat the white rose, you will have a girl. And if you eat the red rose, you will have a boy. You have to choose. You cannot eat both of them.
The queen was not sure that she believed the old woman, but when she came home to the castle, she went out in the northwestern corner of the garden, took the mug with the big ears, turned it upside down and placed it there for the night. When she woke up in the morning, she immediately rushed down to the northwest corner of the garden, took the mug, and there was 2 roses, a white one and a red one. Should she eat the white one and then give birth to a little girl? She would then grow up to become a young woman and marry a young man and disappear and say farewell. Or should she eat the red one and give birth to a boy? And the boy would grow up and become a soldier and he would go to war. She didn't really know. So she took one and it tasted very good. So she ate the other as well.
But she thought, she will have twins. That's good, right? And very soon she noticed that she was pregnant. And as her stomach grew, the king, the court, and all of the people in the country, they rejoiced because finally they were going to have an heir. And when the day came that they were in the birth chamber together with the midwife, it was only the queen and the midwife. And first she gave birth to something small, green, slithering, that just hid in the covers and in the duvets. But just a minute after that, the queen gave birth to a beautiful little baby boy, a little prince. And he was perfect. And the king was so happy, and the court and the people, they celebrated for many days. And the little prince, he grew, just like all children do. And one day, he had become a man.
A young prince. And a young prince shall have himself a princess so he could get married. So the prince saddled his horse, sat up, said farewell to the king and the queen and rode off. He hadn't gone far when he met a crossroad. And on that crossroad was a big lindorm, thick as a man's thigh. And the Lindorm slithered and raised its head.
You shall not have a bride before I get one.
So he had to return to the castle, and he told his father and his mother there was this big snake, and he told that he should be married before me.
And then the queen had to confess that she had indeed given birth to a Lindorm just before she gave birth to the prince. And so the Lindorm was the firstborn.
And the king immediately understood that the Lindorm had to have a princess before the prince could have one. So a message was sent to a princess in a neighboring country. She came to the castle. She had a dress on, her beautiful wedding dress, and she walked up the aisle in the church.
And not until then did the Lindorm come slithering inside up the aisle and stood beside her, and she was wed with the monster. And in the evening they were left in the bridal chamber and the doors were closed.
In the morning the king and the queen opened the door. Were shocked by what they saw. There were blood everywhere, some flesh, and there on a chair was a shift, white.
Everyone was shocked. What had happened? No one knew, and there were no answers. But time passed.
And a year passed, and the prince thought that now it was time for him to get married. So he saddled his horse, he went off and met the Lindorm, who was lying there on a crossroad waiting for him. And it slithered and it raised its head.
You shall not have a bride before I get one.
Turned around, he went to his father, his mother, and told that the Lindorm was still there on the crossway.
And now a princess was sent after from a country far, far away, where they had never heard what happened to the first princess. And she came, she was dressed in her bridal gown, and she was led into the church and left at the altar. And after her came the Lindorm slithering up the aisle and stood beside her, and they were wed. And in the evening they were left alone in the bridal chamber, and the door was closed.
And in the morning again they opened and saw the blood, no sight of a snake, and there on the chair a shift.
Now they were horrified. How could this happen again? But time passed.
And another year passed, and the prince once again rode off, met the Lindorm, who said,
You shall not have a bride until I have one.
Turned around, he went to his father and mother, and now the father was just so worried about it. He was never going to get the Lindorm married to any princess. So, worried as he was, he walked down into the forest, and he passed a little cottage, the forester's cottage. And he remembered that the forester had a daughter. So he knocked on the door. The forester let the king in. They sat by the table, had a cup of tea, and then the king said, Your daughter is going to be married to my son. And the forester knew what had happened to the two princesses, so he frowned, but he said, Yes, of course, your majesty, when you say. And so the king got up and left the cottage and went back to the castle.
No one asked the girl what she wanted. And on the day before the wedding, she went for a walk in the forest where she had grown up, where she knew all the trees and the stones and the animals and the birds. And the tears, they ran down her cheeks. But there she met a little old woman, and that little old woman came right up to her and said, I know what troubles you, and I can help you. If you can help me, I am going to listen, because I really need help right now. This is what you're going to do. You will, before you go to the castle to be dressed as a bride, you will put on nine clean white shifts. They have to be clean and white and new. And if you don't have them, you have to borrow them. And before they leave you alone in the bridal chamber, you have to ask for 1 barrel of lye, 1 barrel of milk, and an armful of scrubbers made out of bristles. And the old woman continued to explain to the girl what she should do. And the girl listened, thanked the old woman, and then she went straight to knock the doors of her friends to borrow shifts. And the next day she went to the castle. She was dressed as a bride. She was led up the altar, and the Lindorm came slithering up the aisle and stood beside her, and they were wed. And in the evening, they were left in the bridal chamber. But before they closed the door, she said, "Please, I need to ask for a couple of things." And the people listened to her, and they just laughed at her. The people in the court thought, what are these silly, stupid demands of a peasant?
But the king told them not to laugh. What are you laughing about? Go and get it to her. It could be her last wish.
And when the things had arrived and the doors were closed, the girl was alone with the monster.
Take off your shift.
Oh no, you first.
Nobody has said that to me before.
But I do. You first.
So the snake slithered and shed the skin.
And the girl took 1 shift off.
Take off your shift.
You first.
So the snake slithered again and shed off the skin of him, and it lay there on the floor.
And the girl took another shift off. And this way it continued. A snake skin, a shift. A snake skin, a shift. Until the girl was completely naked. And on the floor was the Lindorm, now much smaller and red. And she took him just like the old woman had told her, and put him in the barrel of lye. She took one of the scrubbers made out of bristles, and she started scrubbing. And the lye was strong, and it stung her skin, and the smell and the blood. But she scrubbed and she scrubbed and she scrubbed until all the bristles were broken, and she took another one, and she continued and continued until all the bristles of all the scrubbers were broken. Then she took this that now more looked like a piece of flesh, and she dipped it into the barrel of milk, and she washed it, just the way you will wash a small baby, carefully and gently. And then she wrapped the whole thing in all of the 9 shifts. She took the bundle on her arm, she went to the bed, and she closed her eyes, because the old woman had told her that she had to sleep, if only for a moment. And her heart raced. But she was so tired, and she fell asleep.
The next morning, the king and the queen went into the bridal room with a lot of fear in their hearts. But first they had the smell of the lye and the milk and all the snake skin on the floor, but there on the bed lied the girl, and beside her was a beautiful young prince, lying happily sleeping.
Thus, with the help of the old woman, the girl had broken the curse of the prince, and this he never forgot, and the people of the country never forgot.
That's why when he became king, a wise king who ruled the country wisely with the queen next beside him, he was always known as King Lindorm.